Okay, I think we will call to order the 37th public meeting of the Mass Gaming Commission on November 27th. First order of business is approval of the minutes. We do have the November 13 minutes. Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I had one from last week that I forgot to make that change or send that change along to our secretary, but on page 5, one of the folks that was here with College President Messner was Michael Suzor, and it's S-U-Z-O-R.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. I noticed it last week, and I didn't send you an email with a correction.
Okay, anything else? Want to move their acceptance, Commissioner McHugh?
I move that with that correction on page 5, that the minutes of the November 13 meeting be accepted.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, project work plan. I think first of all, we are going to, for the audience, I guess the web folks won't be able to see this, but we are going to be using this chart. We're going to be having a discussion about this project management chart, and later on we'll be referring to it from time to time. But I think when this is the section here in the phase 1 application process, which is going on right now. You can see in here that we're in the process of accepting the background information, but this has been being handled mostly by Commissioner Cameron. Do you want to just give a quick status report on where we're at in terms of the process?
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to do that. From the standpoint of investigations, we look at this scope of licensing, requests for waivers, as some of them may take a little some investigative resources in order to make these determinations. So we in the IEB have taken taken all of these requests. We're putting a policy in place to secure the documents, and I'd like to introduce Lieutenants Brian Connors and Kevin Condon from the State Police. Gentlemen, please stand up.
Welcome.
Both lieutenants have been assigned to the commission from the State Police. They are longtime investigators in a number of different criminal capacities, and I'm very grateful to the State Police for sending their best and their brightest our way in order to assist with background investigations, and eventually it'll be other investigations as well as those troopers' responsibilities who will have responsibilities on the floor of the gaming commission, or rather the gaming floors. So.
And you'll be basically full-time with us, or both of you will be basically full-time with us, right? Great, welcome.
Yeah, we think it was important to work with our consultants to have a full understanding of the background investigations, and of course the State Police have enormous resources within the state to assist with information that may be developed in the state with regard to any of those licensees. We're looking at things like document security at this time, a process to work with our consultants. We are ready to go with investigations. We have that process in place, and that is the status at this time.
And I think we just sort of, we have received most of the packages of proposals about who should be background checked, right? So stage 1 is that the developers send us a package saying, here's our structure, here are the organizations and the individuals that we think should be background checked. Then we are now, there's some investigation that has to go on in that to make sure that we agree on who the so-called background checkees or qualifiers are. And I think we've got most of those proposals in so far, and that's the process that's going on
We
right
have,
now.
Mr. Chair, there are some that do not have any requests for waivers, so there will not be necessary to conduct any initial investigation at this time. And of course, we're aware of others who are demonstrating an interest now, so there will be, in fact, there will be a meeting with our consultants this week with a company who has recently shown an interest, so that we look at this as a process with up until the 15th, so we will be handling questions as well as investigations throughout up until the 15th, and then it will certainly all be investigations at that point.
Right. And this is just indicative of, for people who are concerned about the timing of this, that if a proposal comes in and we don't have any difference, they don't ask for any waivers. They're saying, okay, here are all of our people. These are the people that we want investigated, no problem. We're not asking for any waivers. Then the process goes like that. We can then start investigations, and that takes time off this chart that we'll be talking about. I don't know if you can't really see this very well, but this green line up here is the entire background check process, and we've allocated 9 months because we assume that there will be issues. But any time that can be taken out of this 9-month process is time which goes to the bottom line of getting the applications out. The background check process is the single largest chunk of time in the entire process, the total of 12 months. 90 days for people to submit the background forms, 6 months to do the checks, and another 3 months to have hearings and debates if there are issues or any contested outcomes. So when people are concerned about the timing, this is the critical variable right here. And the developers can help us a lot by submitting the information quickly, submitting the information cleanly, not debating about who should get qualified and so forth, but just FYI.
Mr. Chair, one additional issue with regard to scope of licensing, and that would be to start a conversation about utilizing our investigative resources. Something that I've thought about is focusing our investigative resources on the slots license initially. I mean, we are prepared to start every investigation as they come in the door. We are prepared to put a team to investigate. But we could make a decision to focus on slots, make sure we get those licenses done in a timely, those investigations done in a timely manner, which would also mean making sure we're prepared regulation-wise to move that process forward. We did get the investigations, rather the applications out a few days early, and we could make a decision as a commission to move forward with focusing on the slots license time-wise, and then move on to the next phase as we're investigating the other licensees.
As a practical matter, is it an either-or proposition? I mean, or could
it is not. We are prepared. We have the investigative resources between our consultants, the state police. We will be hiring some folks on our own to put a team of investigators on every single application as they come in. But it doesn't mean we couldn't make it a focus to really use our resources in a way that would expedite the slots licensees.
Right. What do people think about that? I mean, it's a really important question, and I think clearly the legislation sort of anticipated that that the slots would move a little quicker. We do have it starting quicker on our. We have the slots license being awarded, I think, October, November of next year, less than a year from today, ahead of the casino licenses. One of the questions on our key policy questions is, how should we think about the slots license? Do we think about it strategically in relations to the casinos and in the locations, et cetera? So what do you all think?
I think we ought to discuss that in the context of the key policy questions that we're going to discuss in a couple of weeks. The other piece to think about, and I think it's doable, is segregating out the regulations that we'd need in order to support a slots piece. Those regulations have to be done to support the casinos, which are going to have slots in any event. So it's just a question of assigning a priority to the slots piece and not worrying about or not worrying about, well, of course we'll worry about it, but not dealing now with the other regulations that may be necessary for table games and other kinds of things. So that's certainly doable. And I think it's something we ought to consider very carefully for a whole variety of reasons.
Right.
But I think we ought to consider it in the context of the discussion of the policy questions so that everybody understands what's on the table when.
I agree with that, and I don't think we should come to any conclusions today. I sort of, Commissioner Cameron mentioned this, and she's going to be starting the investigations even before we get to our policy questions. So I thought it was worth at least, airing it a little bit.
Right.
And letting our audience know that this is something that we're thinking about, and we're game for input on this topic as well. Any other thoughts that you want to bring up on this?
No, I mean, I'm in full agreement of that. One point I would highlight is that it occurs to me that during the investigation process, a number of things could come up, between, let's say, meetings of the commission, in which a lot of decision is really delegated by, as a practical matter, to the director and the investigators. So the specific focus, my guess is that may shift from time to time as things come up, and that's just something that we should not attempt to micromanage, if you will.
Right.
That maybe goes without saying.
Right.
But ultimately, we set the policy and the direction.
Yes.
And we resolve any contests between the IEB and the developer or applicant. So I agree with not micromanaging. But
Right.
ultimately, we are going to have the both hands on the wheel as we go forward.
Absolutely, and the key, or one of the key pieces of that clearly is this major policy decision that we just talked about.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I have thoughts, but I will wait until we get into the policy discussions to,
Whose question is that? Is that your question? The one about the slot sequencing?
It is not my question.
Whose is that?
Two or one.
I have an opinion, of course, but
No.
Some of it gets to, on question 8, Mr. Chairman. It's implicit there.
Yeah, but there was another one specifically. If nobody knows who has it, that might be a problem.
well, it,
touches on a
No,
number
it's there.
of questions.
Yeah, but it was a
Oh,
vote
19, I'm sorry.
on whose is it?
You, Mr. Chairman.
Mine?
It's at the end of your list.
Oh, got it. Oh, yeah, right.
I mean, that's the issue. It all rolls back up to how we beat those out.
Right.
The question tries to get to the point of awarding the license, but
Right.
there's all kinds of activities upstream from that.
Yeah, well, the question I was going to ask was who all, we were talking about talking to Clyde Barrow maybe to get some ideas he might have about it. Are there other good people on the sort of macro side of it, not, on the strategic question, the strategic implications? Are there, the consultants, I guess, would be good to talk to about this. We had it at 3. This was we had this at 3, and I think we're talking about now moving that up because it affects the investigations. That's why I hadn't talked about it, because it's in the green. But I think we should change that and move it forward. Okay.
Perhaps what you're alluding to has to do with, there's a number of moving pieces and moving targets, if you will, where a license may reside and affect all the sphere of influence of other licensees. We may be very early for us to know, because there's still proposals coming to fruition.
Right, but that would bear on, if do we do the casino license slot fast, that's a reason not to. Anyway, all right, so.
Yes, but some of this is going to shake itself out by January 15th.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And we'll be in a much better position, and any policy decision we can make can take account of
Right.
contingencies that develop. We're going to have a lot more information by then.
Okay. Anything else on the scope of licensing and RFA 1 process? I think that's moving along pretty well. It's getting a little more complicated because obviously somebody's been listening to the commission talking about encouraging competition, and we've been pleased to read the newspapers and see that things are happening in western and eastern Massachusetts, which is exciting and I think good for the Commonwealth, but also means we're going to have more on our plate, but that's good. Okay, key policy questions. This was, I think, just sort of a status report. Did everybody get sufficient consultant time? I'm going to need some more for question 19 since we're going to move that one up. But did everybody have enough time? Do we need to reschedule more?
Yeah.
Okay, great. But I'm going to set one up on question 19. And that can be re-color coded and made let's make it a red, yeah.
One thought I had after the initial call is to start putting together, I will do this for first my benefit and then for the benefit of the commission, start putting some bullets as to some initial thoughts and distributing them, I'm just thinking out loud, for potential follow-up also with our consultants after that. So
Okay.
the process
It's an
keeps going.
iterative process, yeah. Well, and also I think there's going to be so much to do on the week of the 10th, and we will have ourselves 1 week. The comments period closes today, I think, and then we basically got couple days this week and next week for us to prepare for the following week. So circulating stuff early is not a bad idea too, I think. Any other suggestions or issues about just on the process? Is that working all right? We got no other additional questions. We got comments,
We've
but
got some comments, but no additional questions.
no additional questions. Okay. And this one now, Enrique, you added in the new ones from last week. We gave some to Commissioner McHugh, I think, in his absence.
Yes, they're not necessarily here in this chart, by the way.
Okay, so I thought you were going to add those in. Those need to be added, just so we have a master.
I thought we were just gonna give them to Jim because they weren't for the chart. They were outside of policy questions. We can look at them, I
All right.
have the notes back.
Okay, well, it's just, yeah, one way or the other. I forget. I thought we were adding them. Maybe you're right. Let's just double check on that. Okay.
But I'll make it a point to follow up myself.
Okay. And I had suggested to Janice that all the comments get distributed to whoever has those questions. There are quite a few comments, and we could all get copies of everything, or we could just get copies if anybody has a preference.
My preference would be to get everything,
Okay.
because we're going to have to discuss them.
Right.
And it'd be helpful to see what what the public input is for all of us in thinking through what we have to say about each of these.
All right, so let's
They've been
change
valuable
that.
in the past.
Yeah, okay. I think that is it. Did you want to talk about some of the security, the room and stuff like that?
Well, we are in the process of
Just so people know.
working on document security for the commission, a secure portal in which to transport confidential information, which all of this is, by the way, this investigative material. We see a real need to make sure that material is secure. The other thing we're doing is hardening a room in our facility, which is which means we'll have a pad with access, and we'll know who enters the room, a safe for the materials. So the state police will be out this week in order to secure the office. So all of the investigative material will be in one place. It will be secure, and we take that responsibility seriously.
And next week, we're going to talk a little bit about the general process of handling.
We'll be
the
prepared to do that,
paperwork. Okay.
yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, on to administration. Director Glovsky.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Afternoon.
I've got the magic wand here, so maybe I'll take, we've been talking, this is really just for our people in attendance and the people watching on the web. But we've been talking about building a project management chart that really gives us the tools to understand what we have to do, when we have to get it done, and importantly, how everything interrelates, where a delay in one place affects a delay in another. And this chart, can you scroll it up and down just so the whole, on the left-hand side, it says that the category, the topic that we're talking about, Phase 1 regulations, as you can see, is basically over. Here's the line that we're in at the moment. Phase 1 regulations is basically over. Phase 1 applications, we're in the process right now. We're accepting, this is the Phase 1, accepting the background check documents, talking about waivers for who's going to qualify, who's not going to qualify, and eventually, when we approve, finally, the applications, that starts the background check process. As you can see, we have, I think, 6 months, and in about 4 months, we're anticipating that the background check for process for the Category 2 license, the slots license, will be ready to go forward probably by April, May, and that's this line. Yeah, I'm not going to, yeah, scroll it back up again. Anyway, what the big one here that I wanted to really focus on is this background check process, so that people really understand the interrelated nature of this. This is the 90-day period in which we expect to get the filled out background forms given to us and to determine with each of the bidders who will have a background check done and who will not. If that happens quicker, if that only takes 2 months rather than 3, then that moves the entire process up by a month. If, on the other hand, we have to debate at great length who the qualifiers are, who the investigated people are, and it goes longer than 90 days, then obviously it's just going to push the whole process out. Then there's a 6-month period here for doing the background checks for the casinos, a 4-month period for the slots. Again, if we do the background checks, there's no issues, it goes quickly, there are no debates or appeals on the decisions, then we can go to the second phase of the application process right at the end of the investigation, which would be give or take 6 months. If, on the other hand, there are debates, disagreements about the outcomes of some of the investigations, then we have an opportunity for the commission to review those contested issues, to have public hearings, and eventually to make decisions another 90 days out. Taken together, that whole process is as much as 12 months, but it can be longer or shorter depending on what is going on. Nothing else is immovable. Any time that we can save in the background check, we can pass on to other stages of the game. Not totally, we still have to write the regulations for the applications, and that will take a period of time, but I think the application, the regs, this is the drafting of the regs, right? So the drafting of the regs would be done about 4 months out in the background checks. So theoretically, we'd be ready to go to applications as soon as the second phase, as soon as April or May or June. So that was just the only point. This is available for anybody to look at, particularly our friends in the media who are concerned about the time. I mean, this is something that's really interesting to understand and to see where the variables are and where we can make changes. Interestingly, just to give you an order of comparison, we just got a report from Pennsylvania. They are issuing some more licenses, and they have just received their applications, not their Phase 1 applications, the full application, and they're allocating 1 year to make the decision from the time they receive the application to the time the license is awarded. So just to give you a little bit of a relative order of magnitude. Okay, anything else on that so we are now, just the commission is now using, every Monday morning we use this and go over it and see whether we're on track, whether there are slippages, if there are issues that need to be addressed. Every time we look at this, it surfaces questions because everything relates to everything else. Down below scroll down to the hires. That's the racing division, the regs and changes we're doing for the legislation about the law. These are all our additional hires, and they are all tied into crucial positions. The head of investigations and enforcement, the director of licensing, and so on and so forth. So it's a very valuable document that we're now using every week. And thank you to our vendor, I forget their name. PMA, yeah, prepared it. Yeah, it's great. Okay, are there other?
And we intend
Yes.
to use this at least briefly at each of our public meetings going forward.
Yeah, well, we were going to see how it goes. And I think it would be a great idea if we can target in. It doesn't actually do it on this chart, but we can target in on the week that we're in.
Right.
And just run through this and demonstrate to the public whether
Right.
we're on track or
Right.
not. I think that's a good idea. Elaine, if you got that. Okay, Director.
So I think you saw the hires, there's a lot of personnel energy being put together now. I've been working with Director Durenberger, and we've got all the racing postings are up, and there's responses to that. So working through that is going to keep us busy over the next 6 weeks. In addition, we have one new employee this week who is working for Commissioner McHugh, and that is Artem Shtatnov, who is starting with us. Commissioner McHugh, did you want to?
Yes, Artem is in 2 days, will be a newly minted lawyer in Massachusetts. A recent graduate of Boston University Law School, is here on a Boston University Law School fellowship program that they've created, and will be with us for a year. The competition was very stiff for this position and publicized, and we're delighted to have Artem with us and know that he can bring some substantial value to our collective
And
operations.
it's purely coincidental that Commissioner McHugh and I both went to BU Law School.
And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that thanks to Ellen Cassidy and Jamie Ennis, who were extremely helpful in being the procurement team for the stenographic services, is that I do have a memo to give out. I didn't have it done in time for the packets, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a pre-qualified group of vendors who can provide stenographic services. I think as we look at even just the month of December, having several vendors that we can turn to, particularly when we look at, I think it's the week of the 10th, when we have something almost every day there, that we went through an entire program. The vast 40% of this was based on sort of their technical response, the quality of their staff, and their ability to meet the requirements that we set forth in terms of being able to turn things around in 24 hours or 48 hours, or to be able to respond to us within 24 hours if we decided that we needed to have an emergency meeting, and also on the quality of the people they have working for them, as well as their business references. And 60% of the response was based on cost. So the top 3 vendors that I would recommend to be pre-qualified for use by the Commission, and I'm not going to pronounce them particularly right, Catagno and Stento, Reporters Inc., and Copley Court Reporting. So we're thrilled to be through that. And again, thank you to Ellen Cassidy and Jamie Ennis for their assistance on that.
Do we need,
Oh, go ahead.
I just was asked, do we need to do anything on that? Do we need to vote to adopt them, or?
I don't know how we've done it in the, when we've done a pre-qualified. I know how we've done it with specific.
We've taken a vote when we
Okay.
pre-qualified our, the 3 sets of advisors who helped us with searches,
Searches, right.
personal searches. We took a vote.
Do we want to do that next week, so I have time to get the recommendation memo
submitted.
to all of you, so that we can do that at that point in time?
That would be just fine.
If that's all right, if that time is all right with you, yeah. Okay, great.
And that's all I have at this time, unless there are any questions?
Each of them would produce draft minutes as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was included as one of the
One of the
things that they would have to do, is
requirements.
that they would have to do summarization of the minutes.
Yeah, great, okay.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you very much.
Commissioner Zuniga, you've got a
Yes.
topic as well?
Yes, I have a brief topic included in the packet as a recommendation to approve Second Amendment of the contract with outside counsel. We have run the course of the prior contract terms. They expired November 15, and Commissioner McHugh, who has been the project manager of this effort, has recommended and conferred with me to put together this second amendment as described in this brief memo here. I could talk about any specifics or answer any questions.
I think, certainly from my standpoint, we've been really satisfied with Anderson and Krieger, so I don't have anything to add. Commissioner McHugh, anybody?
Let me just say briefly, because I worked very, as we all did, closely with them in one context or another over the last 8 months, and particularly in the context of preparing the Phase 1 regulations. They worked extremely well with the outside consultants, and the process we used for taking the regulations from concept to at the actual words and form, the Massachusetts form, really worked well. And they worked very closely with them. Now that we're building an in-house staff, the amount of time and the number of things for which we're going to have to rely on them is going to diminish, but they still have an expertise in the regulatory process that we can and should take advantage of, and now have a store of background knowledge that will be invaluable to us as we proceed. So it's a good asset to have.
In addition to that, let me mention the way this was procured, we have all the flexibility to make any number of amendments subsequent and extensions subsequent to the original contract. So this constitutes very prudent and within the budget as approved by the Commission in September of this year.
Okay, great.
So if there's enough discussion, I move that the Gaming Commission approve the second amendment of the contract with Anderson and Krieger to continue the services of outside counsel. The amendment is for an additional $200,000 at this point, and the proposed term is to extend that from November 15 of this year, 2012, up until November 15 of 2013 for a full year.
Second?
Yes, I second that.
Any other discussion?
I just would note, by way of discussion, that the $200,000 is essentially a cap. We're billed on time, and only for the time actually expended. It's not a commitment of that sum of money, and that's the way the first contract worked. It's the first stage of the contract.
Have we finished the balance? Have we used
Yes,
up everything?
yeah, we
got?
used up the original balance, well, two balances, if you
Right,
will,
yeah.
and the term as well. I mentioned here as well, these, Commissioner McHugh and our consultants have done a great job at summarizing the work plan and modifying the work plan as needed. Some original tasks were modified, others deleted, and others are ongoing. So that has been the effective contract management tool.
Great, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Personnel searches, I think there is in your packet actually, why don't you, Commissioner Stebbins, you want to take this one?
Sure. As a result of our meeting last week, you'll find in your packet a draft job description for a position title of Director of Gaming Workforce and Supplier Development and Diversity Initiative. As we've talked about at previous meetings, we're going to talk about again because of the MOU with the Casino Careers Institute is on the agenda. But we've talked about, I actually think it's in our plan, albeit under a different title, Director of Workforce Development and Diversity. But this is a job description for a position that would not only be the Commission's staff leader on initiatives including implementation of a workforce development plan building off a meeting that Chairman Crosby and I had with key business resources from across the Commonwealth to support small businesses in Massachusetts who may be interested or need to build their capacity to be a qualified supplier and vendor to these large casino operations, and at the same time promoting diversity across these initiatives. So a person with a wide variety of skills, from business development to workforce planning, as well as diversity initiatives in the HR field. But I don't think we've necessarily agreed upon a timing for posting this position, Mr. Chairman, but we can talk about that. But you see in front of you the draft job description for this position.
I thought job description was really good. The only, I'm not sure this matters, but under knowledge and skills required, do you think it's an absolutely prerequisite that they have public sector experience? There could be a lot of people that, you know, have worked in the private sector, but who have been based in the private sector, but interfaced with the public sector.
That first bullet, we could easily move that down into the third category.
Yeah.
Because the second bullet in the third, under knowledge or skills preferred, I think would allow itself to be interpreted as private sector experience, but you know, building off the work, at least in the training area, we know that we're going to do is going to involve a number of public entities, so somebody with experience already in the public sector for doing that type of work, but we could easily move that down into preferred so as not to exclude anybody.
And that'd be worth doing. Any other thoughts about this?
I have a question about the first bullet in job responsibilities. That gives the appearance of exclusivity, and
let's add "and others."
yes.
Is that all right?
If we added "and others," I would prefer that.
That's a good point. I didn't pick that up. Okay, well, I think we ought to post it ASAP. It takes forever to do searches, and because of the process we have to go through. So I think this is very important, and I'd like to see us. I mean, we could, if for some reason we might decide not to do the hire immediately, but I think if we get the ball rolling now and start finding candidates, I'd like to post it this afternoon, and for however long. How long do we usually post?
We
Usually about
keep
a
it
month.
open. Yeah.
A month, okay.
For a month.
Yeah, and send it around. Let's all send it around to people that we know. I'd like to get this one going quickly.
Okay.
Great.
I would just, we do usually only post for a month. If we look at a post for a month from now, we'll be kind of in that holiday window, so maybe we want to extend it beyond the first of the year to the 10th to the 15th of the month of January.
I forget now who does these. Do you do these, or does Eileen do? Eileen, okay, yeah. She's hiding behind Gary, so, yeah, right. Okay, good. So I don't think we need to vote on that, do we? So we're off to the races on that. Good. Update on space. Where are we at? What's our need? When are we going to meet it?
Currently, we're in the process of working with the landlord to do two things. One is to extend the lease in our current space, which, as you guys know, is only a one-year lease. And we also need to lease additional space within the building. So we're working with them with the goal, hopefully, to have additional space by January 15th, because the two spaces that we have will be filled by then. And we're in the process of hiring additional employees and bringing down the racing division people. So we've ordered additional cubes for the space that we're in, which will accommodate the racing division people, but then any additional hires above that, we're going to need additional space. So we're in process, and hopefully we'll know within the next week whether or not the January 15th date will work for additional space in the building. And then after that, the process will be that probably somewhere around the beginning of next year, January, maybe February timeframe, to send out an RFP for a permanent space for the commission. The building that we're currently in probably will not be able to accommodate us for our needs going forward. So That's where we stand.
And if we, did you say by the middle of January we'll know whether, or when will we know whether we'll be able to accommodate the January 15th?
Probably by the end of this week, beginning of next week.
And if we don't, it's,
There's a couple of different scenarios within the building. That's one that's in play right now that would have us with additional space by January 15th. There's other space that we could move into, but it's not as desirable. There needs to be some work done there. We'd have to do some build up. The space that we're currently negotiating for, we can move in after maybe just painting and not have to do any kind of construction to get us in there. So
Okay.
it's more desirable in that
Okay.
standpoint.
great.
We're working it.
Okay, great, thanks. Do you have a place to sit, Artem?
Yes, sir.
Good, great.
Artem has a phone.
He's got a phone too?
He's got a phone. he's
Phone
got
at
a
home?
And a computer, right? Pencils?
Okay, the employee manual, chapters 1 and 3, Commissioner Zuniga.
Yeah, I have included in the packet the latest draft, as we have talked about, with the latest additions and edits. Notably, the edits from the last meeting relative to written recommendations. The policy is now, that the state has, is now included here, that they cannot be taken into account until candidates have met all other requirements, all the prerequisites. But those edits are incorporated here. I have also included in the first chapter, as we discussed a little while ago, our core values and other minor edits. And I've done the same with chapter 3, which includes some minor edits and are now ready to be submitted for approval.
Any further comments?
No, Commissioner Zuniga's done a terrific job with these chapters as well, and I think they are good, sound, thoughtful, comprehensive chapters.
I would agree. Easy to read, to understand, clearly articulated what the process is. I think any employee who would read this would clearly understand what we're all about and what the responsibilities are, so well done.
Great. Do you want to move adoption?
Yep, so I move that we adopt the chapter 1 and 3 of the employee handbook as submitted and presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Racing Division?
Could I just
Yep.
raise maybe a point of order? And so we're going to continue this process. Next week, we'll have a couple of chapters to
Yep.
consider and then continue on with this.
Yep,
'cause
same process,
yeah.
submit them for review and additional research if any.
Right.
And then subsequently
Right. Right, this is a
Maybe we should do it
good
one,
process.
we'll do it one chapter at a time so we could extend this longer. I mean, it's really great stuff. Hate to have this come to an end.
It's thoughtfully done, as we all know.
I'll put in my commercial. This was an initial task contemplated for our outside counsel, by the way, which we
Oh, really? Good.
took out of the original plan. So
Saved some serious money.
My
Right.
billing
Wait till you
rate
see
is
his
much
bill.
lower, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you, that's terrific. All right, Racing Division, Commissioner Cameron.
Yep, Mr. Chair, on behalf of our racing director, Dr. Durenberger, I will be reporting out since she is ill and unable to be to work. First issue is the equine drug testing laboratory closure. A meeting was held yesterday with key staff members over at the lab in order to assure that all of the issues that were pending can be taken care of in a timely manner. And when I talk about issues, it's disposal of equipment and hazardous materials. All of those issues have been worked out. And at this time, I'm assured that we are in a position to close the lab, and I'd like to make a motion that we vote on closing the equine drug testing laboratory on December 31st of this year.
Second,
Second.
discussion?
This is probably a silly question, but I take it there are no pending analyses left.
That's correct.
Okay.
No pending analysis, no pending cases in which involve samples. So we are prepared to properly close the laboratory. Notifications have been made to UMass. We are renting that laboratory at this time from the University of Massachusetts. There will be an official letter sent, but those phone calls have been made and everyone is well aware of our plan, and I would like to credit UMass for being very helpful in offering their services to assist us in the closure, and also like to credit the staff from the State Racing Commission who have worked hard to implement this plan.
Great.
I have another comment, and we'll be in a good position to have selected the new lab as we are.
Correct, that RFP is
ongoing.
awaiting final approval from us, and that process is in place, timelines are in place, and we'll be able to meet those timelines.
Great, great. I mean, this is a big improvement, so I'm really glad. I think it's great. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call our transition coordinator, Doug O'Donnell, who is going to give us a report on the finances of the racing division.
And this was in response simply to my asking at the last meeting if we could
Correct.
just sort of be briefed on how the income and expense works, because I, for one, didn't really understand it. I don't think we'd ever really
Right.
had it presented.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We, Jennifer and I, Director Durnberg, we put together some information last week, and obviously she's not here today. But it's in regards to the revenues and expenditures of state racing, in just an overall picture as to how the money flow works in state racing. It can be somewhat complicated because there are a number of revenue streams and expenditures that go out with the trust funds and whatnot. But what you have before you is a racing division money flow chart, which somewhat simplifies how the source is and where the monies go. So from the top, you can see revenues from tracks. There are two separate accounts that we have. The general account, where the funds are wired in, they're both at Bank of America. And that is the revenue from the state commission, the track daily license fees, and the track assessments.
The revenue from the state commission is what?
It's coming in from the different tracks. It's based on the statutory takeout, and there are different percentages, depending on if it's exotics, if it's live.
Okay.
It's in the statute, and it's on the.
So by state commission, you mean the statutory
Yes, the
assessments?
payments,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yep.
It would be akin to the gross gaming revenue
Right.
that we get.
Right, it's a
Right.
percentage of the pari-mutuel
Right, okay.
wagering.
Got it.
And that's based on again, the statute and what the percentages are. The track daily license fee, which is based on $300 per day when the tracks are open, that's also wired into that account. And the track assessment, which is a computation based on the total pari-mutuels and broken down on a percentage basis. Those monies are also wired into the account. And it's all through the Racing Financial System, which is a program that we have in place. We have a vendor which actually put the program in place, and we are working with him moving forward to see where we're going to go with any type of auditing system we're looking into. Monies that are also wired into that account are the trust funds, the money from the stabilization fund, capital improvement funds, and the promotional funds. The other account that we have is the basic track account, which is, those are actual deposits made from the tracks. The inspectors make the deposits for the occupational licensing fees and any type of fines that may be imposed.
Excuse me, Doug, the
Yes.
stabilization fund and the capital improvement fund,
Mhm.
Stabilization fund is an existing fund. That's the racehorse stabilization.
Yep.
The horse
Correct.
race, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that also the capital improvement fund is an existing fund?
No, the stabilization fund is the one that regarding the dogs.
Is paid out to the former owners.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Errol.
But,
Yeah.
you know, again, it's a calculation between the breaks and the unclaimed tickets where monies are deposited. They're
Right.
collected here in the general fund.
Okay.
The
That's right.
percentage from the RFS that's wired in, and from there, those monies go into the stabilization
Right,
fund.
okay.
Where at that point, they are approved and dispersed to the owners, the dog owners.
And the capital improvement and promotional funds? Explain those.
Again, that's, the capital improvement fund, that's monies that the state basically holds, which are the tracks money. We hold that money for them to do capital improvements. So we will hold money, they will send in a requisition to have work being done on the facility. It'll be approved by us, and at that point, it'll be dispersed back to them for payment.
And how does money go, from what source does money go into that fund?
Again, it's really, it's basically the tracks money, but we hold on to it for them to do.
I know, but what, and periodically issue a call for more money for that fund, or is it?
No, the monies come in. Again, it's a percentage of the breaks from the pari-mutuel
All right,
wagering that
so
comes in.
all of that goes, it feeds all of these funds.
Yes.
Right.
But those two aren't revenue sources to the state. The stabilization, capital improvement fund, and the promotional fund are not revenue sources.
I understand, but
Yeah.
the money comes from the tracks in the same fashion.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, the tracks will submit a requisition to us for work that has to be done, or the promotional fund if they are promoting a race or if there's something that they are doing. And it all depends on what monies are available.
Okay.
You know, and from there, as you can see from the chart, all those monies go into the sweep account, and they are dispersed to the trust accounts, which are the capital improvement, promotional, or the stabilization fund.
All right.
And the process that we currently have now is there is an approval process with the CRs, the cash receipts, that are done on a monthly basis. They are approved by Commissioner Cameron. We're sent to them, and then it's authorized and sent back to us.
And the MGC Oversight Fund, is that that's essentially the operations of the division?
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
So the trust funds feed the trust accounts and the stabilization fund. What you referred to as the two revenue categories, general and track, they feed the oversight fund?
Yes.
Okay. And do the two, maybe this is on your next page, but do the two revenue categories equal the total expense of the operation?
Revenue categories equal to total expense, well, we can look on the next page.
All right, okay.
This is a running P&L or revenue and expense report for the calendar year of 2012. Their actuals up through October, and then the last 2 months are estimates. And if you can see up top, it's broken down by projected program revenue, which is what we had just gone over,
Yep.
the commissions, licensing fees, occupational fees, and whatnot. And then that'll give you the totals, the total program revenue on a monthly basis. And then if you look at the expenditures, that will also show on a monthly basis what they are. If we go out through May and June for the expenses, that's when state racing ceased to exist, which was 5/19. And then the ISA went into place with MGC. So those revenues are done. I get that information every other month, so that's why it's separated there. But as you can see from this, if you look in the first column with the projected program revenues and the expenditures, there is a surplus of showing over $1 million for the calendar year of 2012. The reason why that is so high this year is because of the issue with the local aid, which my understanding is it still hasn't been, it's still up in the Attorney General's office. We haven't got a clear understanding on that yet.
So that category, local aid to host communities, is...
In March, there was a payment. You can see the actual was
Yeah.
$368. That was paid.
Right.
okay? And that should be done every quarter, and it has not been paid since then.
So 3 of those quarters would pretty much equal the $1 million.
Well, no, it would equal, if you look on the following page, that would equal a total of, you can see down the 2012 calendar year payments. No payment MGC, the 3 quarters, that equals $701,431,000. So it's not quite.
The no payments?
Yes.
731,000, did you say?
701,431.
Okay.
You say that should be done, those payments should be made every quarter, and they haven't been done. They haven't been done because the legislation was changed to
Correct.
prevent them from being done.
Correct.
Right, I just want to make that clear for.
Right.
Doug, I may be mistaken, but I thought 2 payments were made and a third one was not.
At this point, this is all that was paid. The issue was with the 189,000, which would have been for the first quarter of this year, January, February, March, which should have been paid in 9/30.
Oh.
September 30th has not been paid.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're going out further to the end of
Yes.
this year. There's another
Because of
273,000, which is not.
Timeline, okay.
And in prior years, has there been a surplus or deficit?
Yes, there has.
Which?
There has been a trend of racing, the pari-mutuels going down.
Right.
But when they abolished the greyhound racing, there were major cuts in the budget for state racing. And since then, it has somewhat plateaued. There was, because of the staffing that was reduced, I mean, staffing doubled up. Racing revenues did decline. State racing has always been self-funded, so it has supported itself. And in fact, last year there was a surplus after all of after the local aid, after the economic assistance, which is in the compulsive gamblers, which is $210,000 combined. There was a surplus of roughly $280,000 at the end of the calendar year. And what happens at that point is it's in the legislation that money is distributed to the tracks, both Suffolk and Plainridge. So they will, which goes to the purse accounts.
Okay.
So the purse accounts will get an additional $140,000 from 2011. And with this year, as you can see, depending on what happens with the local aid, the situation of the status of the local aid, there is approximately, there will be $210,000 taken out of the estimated $1 million, which would leave approximately $800,000 to be dispersed to the purse accounts at the tracks for 2012.
If we don't have to use it for local aid in the end.
Correct.
Right.
And that has to, I mean, that can be expensed out prior to the end of the year for the operating budget. But if it's not done by 12/31, then those monies are distributed to the purse accounts.
Okay. Good. It's interesting, even with the decline,
Right.
that it's stayed positive.
Well, there's an increase this year compared to last year. I think it may have just plateaued in terms of what the pari-mutuel waging is, but it has increased over last year.
Okay. Great, that's very helpful. That's exactly what I wanted. Anybody, is there more stuff here that you want us to look at, or?
Yeah, on the, you can see on the, I believe it's Massachusetts State Racing Commission Racing Development and Oversight Fund.
Right.
Phase 4.
This is in the annual report. This shows a comparison of the program revenues and expenses from 2011 to 2010. And it just does give you a breakdown of the commissions, what the revenue expenses are. And it also gives you notes as to where those monies go and, between the purse accounts, the overages. And this is done on an annual basis. This is put in the annual report.
And it's a calendar year, right?
Calendar year, correct.
And but the outs go to those 3 trust funds, right, not to the operational expenses?
I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't hear you.
The outs, the 965,000, that's what goes to the trust funds.
The outs go back to the tracks. They're unclaimed tickets. So those will go back to the tracks. And in the case of the dogs, it goes to the stabilization fund. You have a year after
Right.
the unclaimed tickets, you have a year, and those monies will go back to the tracks. Or in the case of the dog tracks, they will go back to, or the simulcast facilities, they'll go back to the stabilization fund.
Right. Okay. Great. Anything else? Questions or anything? Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And Mr. Chair, with regard to a transition update, the jobs, as we mentioned last week, have been posted. Those resumes will be reviewed, and we will be prepared to be fully operational on January 1st of 2013.
Great. Anything else about racing?
That concludes my report.
Okay.
One last thing, if I may make note, that we introduced Danielle Holmes several weeks ago as a new staff member. She also will be a newly minted lawyer this week.
All right,
So,
congratulations.
2 on staff.
Little
Congratulations.
gaming commission party coming up. Great, congratulations.
Represents a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Okay, public education and information, Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the course of the last week, I've continued my outreach activities. Of particular note, I've been in contact with the City of Everett and the City of Holyoke. You probably have seen the press reports regarding both of those potential applications. Wynn Resorts is in active conversations with the City of Everett. I met with a couple representatives from the mayor's office earlier today, and we discussed how the city could best get organized for those discussions and what the timelines are, particularly of note the January 15th deadline, and then deadlines going forward on the Phase 1 application process. I've also been in conversation with the City of Holyoke. They are in conversations with 2 potential applicants. In the course of my conversations with both of the above cities, we stressed that it is the responsibility of the applicants and a responsibility of the host communities to try to engage surrounding communities to make sure that it is a process that works for everyone. And we discussed how the eventual process works here with the commission for any sort of appeals of surrounding community determinations. I've also been in conversations with a couple of surrounding communities for at least 2 of the different regions. And the one thing that I did stress to them is that the January 15th deadline should not be seen as the end of any process. Specifically, people shouldn't think that there's a need to get a surrounding community mitigation agreement concluded by January 15th.
Actually,
if you look at our schedule.
If you show them our chart,
Correct.
show them where it is on that chart, yeah.
So, obviously, there's anxiety with all proposals, but the fact that things don't have to be done by January 15th relieves some of that anxiety. Today is the deadline for the policy questions. We've received some of those responses. Pursuant to the discussion at last week's meeting, we sent out an advisory to the legislature, and we detailed to them the January 15th deadline and also our policy process. The final item that I have to report is that we continue to have active conversations with the regional planning agencies on how to engage them on the surrounding community process and advice that they may provide to host communities. And those discussions are proceeding very well. I think that we may have a joint meeting of the 3 impacted regional planning agencies within the next week or so to further discuss that possibility. That's what I have.
Did you, you were concerned about making sure that particularly, I think, the municipalities, maybe both municipalities and developers, had a chance to comment on the questions and stuff, and to get them out to them. Have you gotten the kind of feedback or reactions that you were looking for?
I haven't really seen many of the comments that we've received today. I don't think we've received too many.
A lot of them came in today.
Good.
4 came in today.
And I know the regional planning agencies, at least the first page of questions was sent to every one of the regional planning agencies.
Right.
And I know we'll be getting a lot of comments in those regard. You know, as you know, we also submitted the fact that we're doing those policy questions to all of the adjacent communities as well. And I do see some of those responses have come in so far. So I think we'll have some pretty good comments.
Good. Okay, great. Anything else? Questions?
Just a brief comment. I think as the landscape continues to evolve about proponents and applicants, in my estimation, this idea of involving the regional planning agencies is fantastic because they will provide a very useful, very pragmatic role for everybody. And I think it's great efforts on behalf of all of us, but especially you, John.
Are you talking about in the application
No,
process?
in the coordination of the host and surrounding communities.
Conversations.
Conceivably, you could have a community being both a host and a surrounding community
good point.
of each other.
Right.
And that creates a number of dynamics that are better served with the role of somebody like both John and the efforts that he's leading with the regional planning agents.
Yeah.
John, quick question, and I should know this, but PVPC, do they cover all 3 counties in the Pioneer Valley? Or is there a Franklin County group or a Hampshire County group now that we're finding new entries into the competition?
I'll have to double check that.
Okay. We were really anxious to give an impression, give the reality of outreach and customer service to the developers and the municipalities, and I think you've done that, and it's been great. It's what we wanted, was to have somebody really be visible and in touch and reaching out and available. And the fact that these new communities have someplace to turn right off the bat is great. We've been out trying to encourage new communities. It's good that we can service them when they appear. So, great.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner McHugh, you came back from a problem gambling session. Was there anything you were interested in passing on?
There are 2 things, Mr. Chairman. I'll have a memorandum that I'll distribute to everybody that goes into a little bit more detail. But this was the forum was entitled New England Problem Gambling Consortium. It's a meeting they hold twice a year for all the compulsive gambling groups in the New England area. So there were representatives from Rhode Island there were representatives from Connecticut, representatives from Massachusetts, and 2 points among many thoughtful contributions by those assembled stand out. One is that the New England Council has recently hired, 3 weeks ago, a person who has spent his entire career in surveying, largely on behalf of lottery commissions. He was the marketing director for the Connecticut State Lottery for the last year and a half. He ran a consulting firm for 20 years in which he serviced lottery commissions all over the country. And before that, he was on staff of some other lottery commission. So he was a marketing director in all of those capacities. He's now turned his talents to creating, and his first order of business is to create a survey in Massachusetts to establish a baseline of compulsive gambling. And he is designing now a survey that he will use, an online survey, that he will use in a statistically valid way, he says, to accomplish the effort of, accomplish the task of creating that baseline. He described basically what his methodology was, and said that before the actual questionnaire is sent out, that he will coordinate with us and other stakeholders. But it seems to me that that fits in precisely to the kind of research and baseline establishment that we're trying to do.
Absolutely,
here.
yeah. And who's funding that?
Massachusetts Council on Compulsive
This
Gambling.
body?
Yeah, is funding.
Oh, Mass
Right,
Council.
Mass Council
Yeah.
is funding this. So he's very, he's convinced that he can use this tool to establish a baseline within 3% plus or minus, based on a survey technique. So that was helpful information that I thought we ought to take advantage of, and offered to bring that information back to us so that we can use it. The second is that the council has prepared, had received a number of requests, they said, from cities and towns, both host and surrounding, regarding what they could do to get prepared for what they anticipate will be an increase in the problem gambling that comes from the advent of casinos. And the first thing the council responded was, you've got it now, you may not realize it. But the second thing they did, more proactively, was to establish a checklist of things that they ought to be thinking about. It's a 10-point checklist. They did not have a copy of it there, but we can easily get a copy of it from them. And I thought that our ombudsman ought to have that as part of his kit when he goes and meets with the communities, if he chooses to do that. And so I've mentioned that briefly to him. But I thought that was a good and helpful thing.
Great.
I also reported to them that we were contemplating, as we think about our organization chart, a high-level position for a person who would be focused on compulsive gambling, and received from out-of-state people, from Rhode Island and from Connecticut, accolades for the transparency with which we've been proceeding on this and other issues. So that was gratifying to hear, and I urge them to keep the cards and letters coming, and to let us know if they thought that we were veering off that path. So it was a useful and helpful one.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any update on the Design and Sustainability Conference?
No, obviously, we're still on for the 12th from 8 a.m. to noon right here in Boston. I don't think that we've got any new information from
Sorry,
John.
Commissioner, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. We're still on track for the meeting on the 12th, 8 a.m. to noon here in Boston. It'll be the morning of one of our policy discussion meetings in the afternoon. I think we've squared away the cost, room arrangements and everything. We also sent the invitation out to MMA, and they're distributing it to all their member communities as well. Looks to be a good event, and it'll be interesting to see how we might be able to fold the Walk Boston information into the discussion as well.
Good. Great. Director Driscoll.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'll keep my presentation brief, which is that at the end of this week, I'm meeting with our graphic design team to where I anticipate getting a series of examples on what the new website will look like, letterhead, business cards, basically all of our collateral. And if the designs are on track, then they will add everything additional from what will be our email newsletter, PowerPoint presentations, just essentially all of the elements that will be necessary for branding and just a uniform presentation of information. So I'm excited for that. Many of you in the last couple days have started getting emails from me requesting input on website content. That's going to be particularly busy over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So if you haven't gotten one from me yet, as soon as I get to an area that's really under your purview, you'll get one. And then at that point, we'll basically go over the wireframe and what all the content will be, so that we can quickly get something up that will be, like I said, an ever-evolving site, but it's really moving quickly. So that will start happening over the next couple of weeks. And then the other note that I would just like to make is I've noticed just increased engagement on our social media. For example, we have more followers now than any other gaming regulatory agency does in the country.
Really?
Yeah, so, which was in a pretty short period of time, and I think it's because we've been utilizing it as much as possible to keep the community media public informed on what we're up to. Noticing a lot of retweets on job opportunities and things like that that we're trying to aggressively put out there and make sure that people know about. So that's exciting, and I can just feel the momentum continuing with an interest from really the public at large on specifically what's going on and seeking additional information. So we'll keep that up.
Do you ascribe that to the additional bidders, or to just us, all the stuff you're doing and sending out of the application
yeah,
process?
I mean, it's probably a combination of all of those things, and I think that the more tangible progress that community members read about in the newspapers and really start to see the process moving, the more level of interest comes in making sure that people are staying up to date on our status. So, and like anything, the more you utilize Twitter, the more connections you start to see. So it's a combination of everything, really. But a sentiment in the level of interest, which is great. So, and also demonstrates how important it is that we keep communicating what we're up to, so, and where we're at. So I'm going to be maintaining that, and, but like I said, right now, my focus is really the website, because I just want to see that up and running as soon as possible.
What's your ETA for that?
I'm going to say end of December. My real ETA is I'd like to see it tied into the January 15th deadline, that everything happens all at once. That's what I'm hoping. Might be before, but I'm hoping no later than that. There's just a lot of work that has to get done in between. I think we can do it, though.
Yeah, good.
Great.
Great.
Sounds terrific.
Thank you.
Sounds terrific.
Okay, the Casino Training Institute MOU.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to do this, but I came back from that meeting that I was at all morning, and I left notes on this next topic in my car.
Oh,
Could I just
yeah, let's have a quick break.
ask for a 2-minute
Yep,
break
absolutely.
while I run up and get it?
We'll make it 5.
I apologize to everybody, but
I think we're ready to reconvene. We want to talk about the MOU draft, Commissioner
Sure.
Stebbins.
Sure. And Bob LePage from the community colleges is here to answer any other questions we might have, so I'd invite Bob up to the table. You did, I sent around late last night a revised version of the MOU, and I can quickly walk through those changes, which we made Bob and I made last night over the phone. I also had the chance yesterday to catch up with our staff attorney, Mr. Grossman. We walked through some of the concerns he had with the document, but let me start off just kind of going through what I think were some of the major changes or major recommendations. If you look to page 3, under both parties acknowledge, the last bullet, that the Institute will seek to enter into memorandums of understanding with potential well, with casino developers, operators, I think that change was suggested so that any casino operator or license applicant wouldn't necessarily feel compelled. It would still be somewhat left up to their discretion whether they wish to enter into an MOU with the Institute. If you go down below, the commission agrees. I just wanted to point out language that I had added, which was in the version that went out in the original packet. You know, identifying the Institute really as kind of our lead public partner, again, not necessarily excluding any private for-profit entities that might also wish to partner with the Commonwealth in terms of workforce development, workforce planning. A little further down that paragraph, you see alignment of certification and licensure procedures. Again, not necessarily creating a role with the Institute in creating the licensure requirements. That's actually established up above under the Commission's sole responsibilities. So we just added the verbiage about alignment of certification and licensure procedures. And if you go to the last page, we struck some language from the end of the last bullet where it says work with all potential casino operators to maximize the ability to capture industry and employer information. I look at that as kind of an ongoing task or requirement or activity of the Commission, similar to a model in Pennsylvania. We find that Pennsylvania annually tracks employment in the industry and among suppliers, women, minorities, veterans. Again, some of the key categories that the statute laid out for us. And in that last paragraph, it says the agreement provides a framework for workforce planning, and I think we kind of got around some of the training-ease, so to speak. The licensure training is really best defined and best described as training for licensed positions, the 3 levels of gaming employee positions. So it's not, it's training for those licensed positions among the many others, and we know that the licensed positions are in some respect a small percentage of the overall job opportunities that are going to be available at these large casino resort operations. But I just wanted to highlight those are the big changes, again, kind of incorporating some concerns I heard raised by my colleagues on the Commission as well as Attorney Grossman. But if we have any other further comments or questions, we can review those, and Bob is here to help us answer those. But hopefully we can move on and approve this today and get it signed.
Questions, thoughts?
Well, I have a series of questions that I'd like to preface by saying that I have from the outset thought that this was an excellent approach to creation of a workforce that's going to be necessary and for these casinos, and ensuring, to the extent we can ensure, that the jobs that are created are Massachusetts jobs and not creation of job opportunities that brings people in from other states. I'm aware of states where that has happened because the workforce in place when the casinos opened were not ready. There wasn't a skilled pool, and therefore they had to resort to people coming in from the outside. So I think this kind of an approach, a proactive approach, is essential. That said, my specific comments fall into 2 broad categories, and the first of those is one that I raised the last time we were together, and that is, what does licensure represent? What are we licensing? And the second is exclusivity. And so let me, with those sort of general environmental thoughts, go through specific questions. And the first has to do with the first bullet at the bottom of page 1, which says that we're going to help ensure the integrity of gaming operations by carrying out the regulations promulgated by the Commission for training and licensure. I'm not sure, and I would like to discuss at some point, the extent to which we are going to promulgate regulations for training as opposed to licensure. Because it seems to me another discussion is whether or not we are going to license people as a stamp of approval on their qualifications to hold a key gaming job, or whether we're going to license people because they have both the qualifications and the skills necessary to perform a specific job. And I raise that question because it seems to me that the casino operators are going to determine whether the individuals have the ability, the training, the skill necessary to operate a gaming table, a roulette wheel, a blackjack table, whatever else there is, regardless of what we do or don't do. And so the question becomes whether some kind of a licensure requirement that focuses both on background and training may have one component that can be enormously complicated and unnecessary. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to license training. We're going to regulate the content of training. So that's the first comment I had. The second is a derivative of the first, and it's the penultimate bullet in that paragraph, which says that we will work on providing a permanent statewide database of trained individuals who meet license requirements as documented by completion of training or documentation of experience and skills. Again, are we going to get in the process of certifying the substantive training that is a prerequisite to holding a job, and at the same time creating some kind of a comparable mechanism for certifying that out-of-state people who have some level of experience meet the training standards? Or are we going to leave that entire piece, both of which, it seems to me, are complicated? And the intersection of both, of those two, seems to me even more complicated. Or are we going to basically leave that piece to the casinos? So this seems to me to have decided that question in favor of licensing training and licensing comparable skills from other places. My next question deals with the...
Well, can we deal with that one? That's a big question. Can we go on that one first, then come back to our next one?
Yeah, those are all, the ones that I've raised thus far are integrated, are related.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm not I'd be happy to talk about that further today. But I also would like to hear from our consultants and some others, I think, before we decide on that. And I don't think that any of these are showstoppers insofar as this is concerned, but they illuminate things that we might want to modify slightly to avoid making a decision before we're ready to make it. I guess that's my point.
Right. Well, let's hear, I agree with that question, so let's hear what your take on it is, Bob. What have you anticipated and planned?
In the planning process, or the earlier documents we shared, it was our understanding that the commission would be responsible for ensuring the training, quality of training, as well as the curriculum for training, and ultimately would be tracking those in a database of some kind who were then approved. Now, that may be a pass-off. It may not be the role, it certainly isn't the role of the training, but it may be a pass-off of information to the commission in some way that this person has completed the training now to be certified, has qualified to be then licensed to work in a casino, no different than other industries like nurses, as I've mentioned in the past, where a college will complete them and then another organization will then certify them. So I think it's going to go to what depth of role the commission chooses to serve in this process. I think ultimately, I would agree with the commissioner, ultimately the employability of that individual is going to be the selection of the operator. And that is done in different ways in different states. In some cases, the operator has to furnish a letter of support for that individual after they've demonstrated the skills and the abilities for them then to be approved by the Commission for Employability. So I think, part of our goal in this is to develop the planning process so we have alignment to the best solution.
Right.
And I think there are a number of areas where part of this is going to be the planning and investigation stage of what is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's the role of the community colleges or not, I think there's still some areas that need to be further investigated, and that's one of them. Is there a pass-off? Certainly there needs to be there will be some pass-off to the operators as well, who will want to know who's completed classes so they could then recruit from them. So those will have to be defined.
But your anticipation had been that the commission would use its regulatory role to review and approve in some fashion the content of the training.
Correct.
And in effect, the quality of the training at the end of the day.
Correct. So that those people who were investing their dollars or state dollars invested in them would be ensured that they then could be successful in that occupation.
Right.
So the goal was to ensure that they would then be able to hit the ground running, that they would have the baseline skills, and then on top of that, they might then gather additional skills in the orientation phase. But they would be educated on rules, regulations, proper procedures, techniques, no different than other occupations that are licensed in the Commonwealth.
So if you're a nurse, you have to take some kind of a state exam that tests your nursing knowledge, and you're thinking that this would be comparable to that.
Well, it would be either demonstrated or
Somehow.
completion of,
Right.
yes. No different than many occupations.
Right, which could be ongoing. I mean, no different than a driver's license. I mean, people with driver's license may not necessarily all be good drivers, but it's an ongoing. So there's additional systems in place that also complement the licensing process, including monitoring, enforcement, or re-licensing.
I'm sorry.
No, but to me, I see this differently than those occupations. And the model I'm familiar with is not where the state regulates positions like a dealer. It is up to the state to make sure for licensure that they have the proper suitability, but it is up to the employer to determine the skill sets, and if those skill sets meet the expectations of the employer. So, and I know that there are other states that get involved with licensing before there is a job offer. But there are the downsides. Obviously, there are some people don't complete training, so you've used investigative resources on individuals who have not completed the training, don't choose to go in a different direction, or for whatever reason don't continue. So I would like to see those numbers before making a determination that we are responsible for, having that suitability for licensure on the front end rather than the back end, which is the model I'm familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think that this is not, as a nurse, this is not any kind of a situation where you're dealing with a patient's life and or other issues that would involve the state wanting to have, same with driving. That's an issue where the state has to make sure for safety reasons. I don't see positions such as hotel workers, dealers, necessarily being in that same mold.
Yeah, I think it's, that it depends on the occupation. I think in the states that have moved to a more regulated licensure, trained and then licensed process, it's been around the idea of, one, they historically haven't had a long history, so they didn't grow a workforce over time. It's a new industry to them, so that's part of it. So they are developing different regulations than states that had gaming for a long period of time and have kind of grown organically. Two, I think that the occupations that are selected are occupations that they believe have risk to the Commonwealth because they're a question of, or their state, they're a question of maintaining the integrity of the gaming. So they want to ensure that those people who go into those jobs have the proper background, the proper knowledge, not knowledge provided necessarily by just the employer, but with oversight in the training process, because they believe it ensures a deeper level of integrity of the gaming. And I think in some of these states, they're certainly younger in their experience than other states who have grown workforces over a period of time. I think then the other element to it is that part of the process that has to be happen and what we're proposing here is a more formalized planning process is really looking at how different roles are provided and what curriculum is appropriate and what level of training is appropriate to get them to that stage. And part of the challenge that we're facing, I think now statewide, which I think is a good challenge, but some of this planning has to take place while we have 10 to 14, depending on news coverage, 14 different potential employers of which we have to start preparing a workforce today to deliver them in 4 years, or 3 years, or 2 years.
But those 10 to 14 will only result in a limited amount of licenses.
That's
so
right.
So you're not preparing a workforce for 14.
No, we're
different-
preparing them for 3 to 5 or 3 to 4. But the problem is that, for example, in our region in Western Mass, we have 6 potential employers. We have to build a pool that could then be plugged into all of them.
Any one of them.
Whoever comes out the other side in the process, because in our region with very limited demographic growth, with shortages of key employees that would likely be shortages for a casino, we've got to start building a pool of employees today to be able to deliver them 3 years from now. Just the length of time it will take us to upskill those who are in our labor pool to then be employable. It's going to take a period of time. So we really have to build a regional labor pool that whoever is chosen by the commission will then draw upon. It's not as though we have a Ford plant moving to the region and we know it's a Ford plant.
How does this bear on Commissioner McHugh's question, though? Whether, I mean, yes, that's true, but what does that have to do with whether we should regulate the content or the quality of the education?
I think it comes back to those key occupations and those occupations that the commission feels its role. And I think it goes back to what the commission feels it needs to serve as a role in protecting the job growth, but also the integrity of gaming. I think it comes back to both positions. And there are states who do it different ways.
Right.
There really are. And I think that it also is a little bit different in a state or a region who has multiple employers versus a single employer. So if you're in an environment like Las Vegas or Atlantic City where you have many employers, then your training model may be different than in a state or a region where you have a single employer. So, the goal in this memorandum of understanding is to go through a process to define the best systems for those gaming positions as well as the non-gaming positions.
I think, for present purposes, if we change this from the way it's currently written to those 2 bullets in particular, to one that had as part of the process that we were agreeing with the Institute on, was one that was designed to think through this very question and come up with a model. And the rationale for the model would be an ideal way to proceed at this point, rather than assuming, as this document currently does, that we are going to do the regulation of training. And because once, just maybe repeating myself, once you say we're going to regulate the training, you've already set up now the need for a process to do certifications of some kind of those who are not going to go through the training. And that certification has to somehow balance with the certification for the training, and that gets hugely complicated. So, but if we have to go that way, then we go that way. But I
If you
think we
just,
need to think about it.
I'm sure there's better ways to do this, but if you just took that first bullet point and said, help ensure the integrity of gaming operations by determining and carrying out, then it wouldn't be a fait accompli. And I think what Commissioner McHugh is suggesting is that we just make sure this language is flexible enough that it doesn't predetermine the outcome, and a change like that would do it. Let me ask you something similar, because I had the same question. You referred to training, certification, and licensure. Where does one stop and the other take off? What's the process as you envision it, and who has which role?
So certification would mean that person is certified to be able to be employed in the casino environment. And
Certified meaning what?
that would mean that they would eventually go through the background checks that are required by the state to be able to be employed within the casino, which would be a role of the commission.
Without a job offer?
If they're in non-gaming positions, it would be a function of if that's what the commission decides. But certain states require all people who are employed by a casino to be certified to be employed because they have to pass a background check or a Corey-Sorry check or an age or a residency requirement. So that could be the example that the commissioner used of somebody working in a hospitality environment or in a hotel environment.
So certification would be our process as you envision it, and that would include the background check, whatever level of background. Okay, so what's licensure?
Then the next step would be those people who could be employed from that pool. There are certain ones who will select or are interested in a career in a specific occupation that requires additional training. An example of that might be a slot tech or a dealer or a certain type of cash handler that would require specific training that then, based on completion of that training, would then be licensed to provide that function within the casino environment. So using my earlier healthcare analogy, traditionally back of house of operations in the hospital, they have some basic level of requirements, and then certain occupations within a hospital have training, regulated training, and then licensed by a governing body.
Okay.
That model is a two-step model, so you'd be using resources for certification and then again for licensure. I'm just not sure why someone would choose to go through that process when they could, when many casinos on their own do their own training, and then it's just a question of getting a license. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with any model that requires a certification and then a license.
Are there states that do that?
Sure, there are states where the licensure would be on the back end. The licensure would be the final step in the process. It would be the step where then you as the commission would validate that they have been properly trained, and then...
That's not what the license does. The license validates their suitability.
Meaning integrity and...
That's right, and it becomes a question of whether you believe you as the commission are going to assume the role of validating that they are trained and capable to perform that function based on the expectations of the commission. And that becomes a question of whether the commission believes its role relative to the legislation to do that.
Right.
And that's the question we're wrestling with.
the question.
And that comes
Yeah.
back to where we are,
Right.
which we can't resolve today. And I think it's a critically important question because the answer to it involves two vastly different models of regulation. And so if we can find a way to take that first and penultimate bullet and change that language so that we make finding the answer to this question part of the planning process, that would satisfy me for today's purposes.
I would agree with that. So if you guys can rewrite, I guess it's edit 2 bullets, right?
2 bullets. It's the first bullet and the next to last bullet in that section.
Such that it's not prescriptive in quite that way and leaves us the flexibility to answer this question. Then I'm going to suggest maybe Commissioner Stebbins. I think this is a key policy question that's new to the table, and maybe we could, if you could take the lead on that. And talking with other
Okay.
consultants and other jurisdictions, whoever, and help inform our discussion on, because I agree, it's a really big, sort of almost a philosophic question about how we want to approach this. I just suggested that Commissioner Stebbins take this as a key policy
Right.
question and put it into the mix.
All right.
But I like the idea of then going ahead and signing this, because I think we do want to reinforce the effort and show our support of it.
We'll add some more
Well,
questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I know, no, I know, we're there yet.
Okay, all right.
But when we get there,
No, I'm on.
okay. All right, you got another one.
In the next paragraph down,
Next from what?
I'm sorry, on page 2, the first full paragraph after the bullet. When President Messner was here last year, last 2 weeks ago, he mentioned that private trade schools could be part of the consortium.
Correct.
I think it'd be helpful to, in the third line from the bottom, say that specifically, that trade schools could be part of this consortium, because we have active, at least one active trade school that's very interested in this process, and it seems to me that we ought to leave open, and explicitly leave open, the possibility of them joining the consortium.
So on the line, excuse me,
Where it says, and other
and other
educational.
private and public,
Yeah.
so the standard private and public, profit and nonprofit.
Right. The bullet at the bottom of that page, establishing the licensing requirements for vendors, I guess that one's all right. I guess that one's all right. That's the licensing of vendors. And what
is
I
education?
wonder if we are going to license the vendors, the training vendors, the private training vendors. As I understand it now, we're in the process of trying to work out an interim agreement, at least, under which DPL will license the vendors,
Educational providers.
the educational providers, the training vendors, this is, under a standard DPL process for licensing. And anything added over and above that, for us, would depend on how deeply we want to get into the curriculum regulation process. So we're not necessarily solely responsible for establishing the licensing requirements for educational vendors. We may play a role in that, but DPL as a trade school licenser, God bless you, has a significant role in that now and in the future. So I'm not sure that that bullet is necessary, and in any event, I think it's inaccurate. So I would simply move to strike that bullet. We can always reinsert it later as an amendment, but I would simply move to strike that bullet.
Both bullets?
But what about the second bullet? If you strike the first, what happens to the second?
Yeah, the second too.
I'd strike that one too.
Yeah.
Maybe what needs to be stricken is the solely in the preceding sentence,
Or adding DPL.
or adding others.
Well, we could, yeah, that's a better suggestion, perhaps has a role in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
has a role in. That's
We're
certainly
still
true.
envisioning the planning
That's right.
process.
Or you could even say the Commonwealth acknowledges that the Commonwealth, through the Gaming Commission or other agencies,
Has a role in.
or in that case is solely responsible, because the Commonwealth is the only body, but whatever, you do it however you want to do it.
All right, let's say the Commonwealth and a role, has a role in, if we can do that. And then that obviates my next question, which should, now, the next question I have is in the bullet at the bottom of page 3, at least on my version. No, it's on the current version. It's the second bullet on page, at the bottom of page 3, with the heading, the commission agrees to, 1, then the second bullet. Have we decided that we are going to require financial background checks for all of these jobs, as well as drug testing and CORI and SORI checks?
We have not.
I don't
And,
believe so.
and so I would move that, I would like to see that we would take that out from that. We could always put it back in.
It doesn't, it just says that we would create recommendations about these kinds of issues. It doesn't say we would actually do that. We would give recommendations for certification regarding the methods and procedures for screening, such as. So it only means we would contemplate that and make recommendations.
Well, that's not quite frankly the way I read it, but I see what you're saying. I just don't want to get us past the financial piece, particularly given the population from which we're trying to draw these jobs. And that's going to be a huge disqualifier, perhaps.
But I do think it's something that we are going to have to think through. We've talked about that in our own hiring, that it's a major, I don't know where we're going to end up coming down on that.
No, I understand that. I understand that. I just didn't want, that's just another one of these things I didn't want to, by implication, decide without thinking.
Could we strike everything from the such as to the end of that sentence?
No, I think that's, I understand the way the chairman reads that. And if others read it the same way, that that's simply something we're going to consider, then I'm comfortable with it, but.
I can go either way. I'm personally, I like having these things be called
Right.
out. I think it's
Right.
important that we all
Right.
know that these are issues we're going to have to resolve.
Okay.
I mean, my opinion, I agree with the chairman. I don't think it necessarily boxes us in, but.
I'm just not sure what that has to do with the MOU, to be honest. And the other thing I have a concern about is the word work permit. I think we're really using terms that are not part of the language of the act or terms that I'm familiar with in gaming work environments.
But we do use work permit. If you go back to page 1, where
Yep.
it gives the language from section 5.
Page 1 of this document?
Yeah.
Oh, it comes from the statute.
Yeah, it's the term they use in the statute.
Established in work permit. Yeah.
Well.
Just, and the difference between work permit and a license, I guess I'm.
Again, they're in the statute, it suggests the work permit is the ability to work within the casino environment. The licensure is related to those occupations that are related specifically to the gaming environment.
So they're using work permit interchangeable with what you said before, which was certification?
Yeah, even within the legislation, it's.
I've just never seen work permit. So I'm familiar with license, certification, but not work permit.
Well, we're sort of stuck with work permits, I think. Commissioner McHugh,
Finally, on the last page, the third bullet from the end, talks about creation of an inventory of potential jobs, non-gaming, and assign training requirements and prerequisites. I'm not sure I understand what that means, or what it applies to.
That's identifying all the occupations that are non-gaming occupations that will require other types of certification or specific training to serve in that role. So, for example, HVAC would require licensure, or electrical would require a licensure. So for us to be able to build programs and labor pool backwards, we've got to inventory those in cooperation with the casino operators to get an idea on quantities and requirements. So one of the things that we started is literally creating the listed the job classifications so that we can then get consistency, because one of the things we've already run into, like most businesses, each casino has its own terminology referring to different occupations. So for us to then be able to say, these are the occupations, these are the quantities, these are the traditional certifications, non-casino related certifications that somebody will have to be able to be in that job.
I have a difficulty, as you've heard me say, about getting into the training requirements for blackjack dealers. I really have a problem with getting into the training requirements for HVAC people. I just don't think that's any part of our role, and I understand that the utility of this process that you're involved in is the funneling process and the assignment of people, and I think it's terrific. But I think part of this, from my standpoint, doesn't need commission interchange, and at least at that granular level, to succeed. And I would be very leery of getting into creating requirements for HVAC and boiler operations and, housekeeping. I just don't think that's part of our role. So I would strike that. I would strike that bullet in its entirety. And if there is some, as part of the planning process, something emerges that it really does need the commission's input and support, then let's talk about that further. But at the outset, I would not like to see that as part of the undertaking.
I agree.
I'm fine with that. I would suggest something slightly different. On the first page, at the bottom of that first paragraph, it says, work with lead partner to develop an implementation plan. And then the last line says, including but not limited to. I would say such as, which again just makes this suggestive. Eliminate the section that Commissioner McHugh raised, which eliminate assigned training requirements and prerequisites. But personally, I would like to leave in as a such as creating an inventory of potential jobs. I think the idea of either the commission or the institute or both in some way or other, or this collaboration, having an inventory of potential jobs might be something we would like to do. Might be a good idea. Certainly worth thinking about.
Okay.
But take out the paragraph, take out the words after that you are concerned about.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Yep.
And then finally, and this is a minor one, I would just change the will be followed by agreements in the last paragraph to a may.
I'm sorry, in the
In
last
the
paragraph.
last paragraph, it says, this agreement provides a framework for workforce development and will be followed, and will be followed by agreements which will deal with changes in the scope of the work and new responsibilities of both parties. I would just change that to may. I'm sure it will, but maybe it won't.
Good.
With an unerring instinct for the tiniest capillary under agreements, I think it's the wrong principle. Shouldn't that be P8? It should be PAL, not PLE.
It's there twice.
It's
I
there
was just
twice.
gonna-
Yeah. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I was gonna show off.
Oh, no.
You're redefining the definition of parents.
All right.
No, it's Catholic school.
That's my initial in there too. I'm gonna sign it formally. Any other issues, questions?
No, I think this is really,
Can
really
we,
good.
Commissioner McHugh, would you be comfortable if we voted to adopt this subject to Commissioner Stebbins making these adjustments, running them by you? Or would
Surely.
you rather wait a week?
No, we've been working on this, and the Institute's been working on this, and so I'm comfortable doing it that way.
All right, would somebody, Commissioner Stebbins, or you want to make that motion, or Commissioner Zimmerman?
Sure.
Go
I'll be
ahead.
happy to, make a motion to adopt and have the chair enter into an agreement with the Institute subject to the edits as discussed here today, for the development of, for the planning of a process for workforce development.
Second.
And just informally, you'll run those by Commissioner McHugh, yeah. Any other discussion? Commissioner?
No, I'm comfortable with those edits.
Okay. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
No no's, so motion passes.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, the next item is the Walk Boston comments. I put them on, I think they were interesting, useful comments. It's a little early for us, but I thought it was worth having us look at it, and if anybody, they offered to come in if we need them to. I'm not sure that we do at this point. Commissioner Stebbins, you talked about maybe at least passing this along to the AIA and DSA folks for their consideration.
Exactly.
And we certainly would want to keep this for when we get into writing the detailed regs. Any other comments or thoughts about this?
No.
Okay.
Very helpful.
Yep.
Very helpful.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Hawk, you're up. Are you all prepared here? Okay. Mr. Hawk and friends.
And colleagues, yeah.
Hi.
This is what it looks like.
You're gonna need to make sure you get in that mic. And why don't you introduce everybody?
Hi, my name is Barry Huck. I'm the director of the UAW Mass Gaming Project. I'm pleased to be here today with my colleagues from the UAW to talk about workplace safety for casino dealers. In the audience is Ellen Wallace, who's the sub-regional director of our Region 9A, and Karen Rosenberg, who's an international rep who works in Massachusetts and in Connecticut. I'll let my colleagues on the panel introduce themselves, and Julie Kushner can begin.
Good afternoon. I want to thank commissioners, especially Chairman Crosby for letting us have this opportunity to address you. I'm Julie Kushner. I'm the Regional Director for the United Auto Workers Region 9A. That covers all the northeastern states, part of New York and Puerto Rico. And so we asked for this opportunity to have this conversation with you about some of the issues that we've encountered in representing gaming workers. I think there's probably a couple.
Who do you represent and where? It's not.
I was going to
it's
say, I
not
think there's
intuitive.
probably
Yeah, okay.
a few things that might surprise you
Yes.
about the United Auto Workers representing gaming employees, but we do represent gaming department employees in all of the casinos in Detroit, Michigan, also in 4 casinos in Atlantic City, and in the casino Astar in Indiana, and I work directly with the casino workers in Foxwoods in Connecticut. And I started working with those workers in 2007 after they approached us about organizing a union for the dealers and the dual rate dealers, and so that's how I got familiar with the subject. And there were many things that surprised me about dealers that one wouldn't normally think about, problems they might have at work. And so to begin with, I want to congratulate the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for addressing probably the most important issue for dealers and dual rate dealers, any gaming floor dealers in a casino, and that is by making these non-smoking casinos. I was unaware at the time of how serious an issue that is. Now I've become incredibly aware of it because it is really a life and death issue for the workers in that industry. And so we're really excited about the fact that the statute prohibits smoking on the gaming floor. There are some other issues, however, that you might not think about. And so we wanted the opportunity to share with you as you contemplate training, as you contemplate research. And I think there's an opportunity to really get ahead of the ball in a couple of areas, and one is ergonomics and the design of tables and the design and the training of workers about how do you protect yourself from the strains and the stresses of this job. And so we asked one of our dealers to come and talk about the workplace injuries that she has suffered, and then also an industrial hygienist from our staff who has worked with our folks to sort of begin to try and understand this. It's not something you think of, but there are serious injuries that are involved with dealers from the repetitive motion that they engage in, from the need to preserve the integrity of the game, so the constant surveying of the table, and Mary can explain those far better than I can. But we think there's a really great opportunity here for you to consider this. And we know you have some very big issues before you, which we heard about today is just a little tiny piece of them. So we know this is an issue that you may have to come back to later, but we at least wanted to put it before you so you could think about it. So with that, I'll introduce Mary Maglione.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Mary Magliano. I was born in Fort Dix, New Jersey. I'm an Army brat. I was born February 21st, 1953. I was raised all over the United States and Europe as well. My family did a lot of traveling, my father being in the Army. I started working at Foxwoods actually February 10th, 1992. I had to think of that one. 1992, I was hired, one of 500 dealers selected to learn how to deal blackjack. I had to go through the process of being interviewed by a casino worker from Atlantic City. And from that process, I went into an interview to see what type of skills I had in mathematics, counting, you know, things of that nature.
So apropos of our earlier discussion, this was just complete, like an open cattle call? Anybody could apply? You didn't have to have any particular background? There was no training process?
No, you didn't have to have any background check or nothing. It was just, you know, you fill out your application, you give them your resume, they look it over, and whether they thought that you were qualified to do a job, you know, working in the casino business, you were asked to go for a second interview, and that second interview then followed you to a room where there were gentlemen that were actually going to be instructors on how to deal craps, blackjack, the Asian games, you know, roulette, you know, all the table games on the casino floor. And I was chosen to deal blackjack, to learn how to deal blackjack. And I've been in the business now almost 20 plus 1 year, 21 years. And back in April of this year, I had to go through surgery. And this is the 4th surgery I've been through in the 20 years that I've worked at Foxwoods. I had to have a disc fusion to the neck, and this was my 2nd disc fusion. The first disc fusion actually took place June 15th, 2005, where I had to have 3 discs fused in my neck because constantly looking down the tables dealing blackjack, I degenerated 3 discs on my upper neck. So those had to be fused. And back in November of 2008, I formed carpal tunnel in my left hand and also tennis elbow because of the way you have to structure your hands to get the shoe, get the cards to come out of the shoe and deal your game. So I had to have tennis elbow surgery and also carpal tunnel surgery in my left hand and my left elbow. And then in April of this year, I noticed that I was having numbness in my hands, my arms, my shoulders, and having a lot of pain in my neck. And I went to a neurologist, and the neurologist says, I hate to tell you this, but you've got to have surgery again on the last 2 discs of your neck. So now all the discs in my neck are all fused. And I still have numbness in my hands, my arms, my shoulders. I get muscle spasms in my neck. And I was told that I would not be able to do that job anymore. And at almost 60 years of age, I loved doing my job. It was a very good job. The pay was good. Missed the people. And I just can't do the job anymore. My hands are just shot. So now I guess I have to resign my position. I've got till January 8, 2013 to resign my position as a high-stakes dealer at Foxwoods, because I know I can't go back.
Well, that's a terrible story. But
Yeah, it is a
from our
terrible
standpoint,
story.
I guess the issue is what can be, what are there things that we can, I assume you're going to get to this, you know, is this avoidable? Is this something that
Absolutely.
should be, that people like us can speak to? I mean, that's, you know, what's.
I think that's, and Andy's going to address some of that
Okay.
from the industrial hygienist point of view of what we have learned about these jobs, because it's not, this isn't an isolated incident. It's very common. I was shocked to see how many young women that I was working with while we were negotiating the contract had neck surgery. But I think Andy can talk a little bit about table design and about training of workers to, you know, protect themselves to the extent possible. So maybe, Andy, you want to start?
Sure. I did, you've been provided with a handout of this PowerPoint presentation. I don't want to PowerPoint you to death, but it does, I think the pictures are valuable. Looking at table design, how workers interact with their workstation. I'll just run through quickly through these slides. There's 17 slides, so it's not... You know, this is a gaming table, and if a trained ergonomist looks at that, he can see a multitude of risk factors. And I'm going to run you through some of those risk factors. But the way his hand is postured over those chips, his right arm, that angle of his upper arm bone and his trunk posture, the way he's leaning forward in his chair. If you can see his left arm is right up against a hard edge. So you see a nice soft cushion on the outside edge for customers. And then when you look at the operator's side of the table, you see some hard edges. So the science of ergonomics, study of work, there's a number of risk factors that we just saw all in one picture. Awkward postures, repetition. We didn't have a moving picture, but mechanical stress concentrations, that's that hard edge of the table. Forceful exertions. When we talk about force, you often think, well, what does that have to do with casinos? We represent slot techs, and the slot tech has to pick up a 800-pound slot machine on a cart and move it across carpeting many hundreds of yards from storage to the gaming floor. They move things around constantly. And that's been a significant problem in Detroit in particular. Forceful exertions, so that's you're talking about backs and shoulders and pushing 800-pound slot machines. But if you look at somebody actually picking up a card or picking up a set of chips or a Asian game called Pai Gao, which is a lot of chips, it's like shuffling dominoes. Those are actually forceful exertions on the fingertips and smaller muscles of the hand. Also, environmental lighting, temperature, noise are issues that we deal with in ergonomics. And then static muscle work. We're standing for long periods of time. You're reaching out and holding that posture for long periods of time. So again, is this an awkward posture? Here we have a very person at one end of the anthropometric spectrum. She's very short, but she has to work at a workstation that's a standard height. And here she's getting that roulette table, roulette wheel spinning. She has to also reach out and do all this gather chips and so forth. So how do we design that workstation so that the shortest person can work comfortably and the tallest person can work comfortably? We've provided you with a paper I think it was written in New Zealand, where they looked at different types of steps, different types of table edges, different types of shufflers. And then they did user trials and came up with some good design techniques for how to make the equipment better. Here again you have this idea of pinch grips. This is an awkward posture that results in really forceful exertions of the hand. Puts pressure on that median nerve in your palm. So we do have a lot of these types of injuries. Carpal tunnel syndrome, epicondylitis or tennis elbow, shoulder injuries. Each of those injuries, by the time it gets to the point where people miss work or get medical treatment beyond first aid, or in Mary's case have surgery, goes on an OSHA log. So as a union, we're able to get those OSHA 300 logs and calculate incident rates. And by far the ergonomic hazards are the ones that show up consistently across the casino environment. Places where you have a standard, say there's a couple of papers in here from, I think, British Columbia, there's one from Ontario. Canada has an ergonomic standard. So they're working on ways to develop better equipment in Canada. Across the border in the U.S., there is no standard, so there's less of an impetus for doing equipment design.
Is there no, there's no AGA working on this, or the unions working on this? There's nothing sort of in the pipeline of standard?
We have because of our work in the auto industry, we have a really good set of training programs and tools used to develop. So there's a computerized tool where we could set up a table, look at different sized people. As you reach out and pick up chips, it'll calculate the torque on your arm. And you can redesign workstations that way. So we've used that in seated workstations and non-industrial settings. There's also a really good tool, again, I think it's in the footnotes, but it's called the Hand Activity Level, TLV. So it's a non-regulatory standard that looks at the force of the pinch grips, number of repetitions, and it says this job is beyond what's acceptable for most people. So there are a number of tools out there to evaluate jobs.
But there's nobody.
But I don't think there's anyone right now who's looking at it. And we started looking at this in the negotiations of the first contract because we were looking at all the issues that people brought to us, and this drew our attention. That's when we got in touch with Andy, and we started looking into it in Detroit and in Atlantic City as well. So I think we're beginning to look at it, but what we're hoping for is, especially in a case like Massachusetts, where you're creating new standards, new regulations, and really starting out with an industry that there might be interest in, partnering with, looking for grants or partnering with the unions to really study these issues and try and come up with standards that would, as Andy mentioned, like they developed in Canada, that sets an incentive to maybe create better workstations. Right now, we're not aware of, and I know he has some suggestions, but.
Forgive me for interrupting, but are the casinos receptive to this? I mean, in the long run, I would think their interests would be parallel. Maybe not, they wouldn't perceive it in the short run, but in the long run.
We do have some language in our contract in Connecticut for the Foxwoods workers that we can pursue around these issues. But, as you can imagine, in just starting out, we had a multitude of issues to deal with. But I think that they are receptive to it because, as you can imagine, there are costs associated with this.
That's what I mean,
because of the healthcare costs and because of the injuries and what it means and lost work time and all the other things that go with it. So I think that it is an area where you can develop in partnership with the employers.
Are there manufacturers who are looking at these issues? For example, in Canada, if they have standards, they must have manufacturers who are willing to develop tables that meet those standards.
There is some work on that. One of the issues around ergonomics is if you go on the web and Google ergonomic blackjack table, a lot of them pop up. Whether they're adequate or not is a question. But it is if you look at research, you'll find quite a few studies on auto assembly and very little. I think I provided you with just about everything. All the research on ergonomics in casinos, so it's not well studied.
Okay.
Again, this is a table where you have a tall worker on the left and a short worker on the right. Again, you can see that the person who is termed the box on a craps table, he's the one with the elbows, contact stress in the elbows there. This is a good example of a chair. There's a little bit of glare there, but the idea of providing good equipment, a good ergonomic chair is a simple fix that's doable, something that provides lumbar support, arm rests, a place to rest your arms in between exertions. So that doesn't exist here. He's leaning forward. Shoulders are complex system. There's 4 major muscles in the shoulder that relate to the rotator cuff. And what we've done is done some video of different dealers and different games, and then done a posture analysis of shoulders. And it's actually quite similar in terms of awkward postures. If you're assembling a dodge dart or dealing poker, it's actually pretty similar. Again, I provided you with there's a paper where they looked at can we change the target location when that dealer has to lay his cards down or pay out the chips. Can we reduce the reach distances by just changing the felt? So that green stuff, the felt on that table, is changed all the time. And oftentimes the game is redesigned. Can we change that layout to reduce reach distances? Again, a simple fix. There is a bunch of data on, I just provided some cost data on cost of rotator cuff injuries. This is probably the 4th highest in terms of cost per surgery, first being backs.
This is casino people? This is just rotator cuffs?
This is just rotator cuff in particular. The state of Washington has a good system where so the insurance providers and the workers' comp providers are the same, so they can collect and look at the data. So there's a number of different tools that we've developed, again, through the auto industry. University of Michigan, University of Ohio have developed tools to evaluate shoulder flexion. And they've done studies on some of the same motions you see that are the primary causes of rotator cuff tendonitis are things that you do when you deal. Internal rotation of the humerus, it's a bad thing. Reaching across your body, it's a bad thing. And that's required a lot of times when dealers have to deal across the table and use one hand. So the dealers a lot of them have developed ways, walking the table, they call it, or changing postures, or dealing with 2 hands. Sometimes it's allowed in some games. So they've developed some survival skills, and those things need to be evaluated and transferred to new hires so people can avoid injuries. Again, another major thing we see are lower extremity complaints. So people are standing and bending. The University of Michigan's recently completed some newer studies that link these kinds of operations to osteoarthritis and different diseases of the feet and legs. So there's some. This is an example of a quick fix, padded, elevated work stand on a craps table. So that just gives you a little outline of some of the risk factors faced by workers. The UAW has participated in a host of research projects around ergonomics. We have a pretty good model as to how these tools can be applied to ergonomic risk factors in casinos.
So our hope was by bringing this to your attention, it's something that you could consider either as part of creating standards or regulations for casinos, or also part of training programs. We also were hopeful that there might be an opportunity to look for grants or partner with institutions that would be willing to study this issue because we're in such a unique opportunity here where we're just seeing the introduction of this industry to Massachusetts, tracking data so that there is a real database to start from, and encouraging training where there are things that can be shared with workers that would help them to protect themselves. So if you're having training programs to teach people how to deal blackjack, that if you could insert into that a real serious ergonomic training as well to give people as much assistance as you can, or the easy fixes like the padded stands to elevate the short people so that they're not at greater risk. So those were just some of the ideas that we had, and we're certainly working on these issues through collective bargaining in the other states where we represent workers, but thought it was an opportunity to raise them with you at the outset.
Well, it's great. We never would have, never even would have thought about this if you hadn't raised it. It's great. You have seen Mr. LePage from the Worker Training Institute. Yeah, and that's I mean, there's a connection there, should surely be made. And two thoughts occur to me. One is, we'd have to think this through, but we do have a big research agenda, and we are funded to do it. And it's to look at the socioeconomic impacts. Well, this is a socioeconomic impact, and it may be that looking for baseline data and assessing as time goes on what the impacts are on workers, that would be an element of that, certainly worth thinking about. And that research design is going on right now. The other thought I had, was the job description for the person who we're going to put in charge of supplier and workforce development. Commissioner might add a bullet point, at least it would be nice if that person could sort of take the lead, if we're going to consider partnering with the casinos and with unions or employees to think about, research on this, and so it'd be good to have that person take the lead on that, if that fits right in.
Great idea.
Yeah.
I do want to say that we've found that these are really great jobs, especially the dealer jobs. They're very skilled jobs. It takes a particular type of person to be able to do it, not just a smart person. I found that some of our smartest people have tried to go through the dealer training and say it's beyond them. And when they explain the extent of these jobs and what they have to do and the number of hands they have to deal in a minute and the number of calculations they have to make on odds in a minute, I've been very, very impressed with the workers and with the quality of the jobs themselves. So I think that, we're very excited about, we don't want to discourage anybody from thinking these aren't great jobs. They are good jobs. I think we're just looking to make sure they're the best and the safest for people.
How much does that position pay, more or less? What's the range of?
Well, being there almost 21 years, I
Right.
was making about $28 an hour.
That includes the tip, which is called a toke.
The toke
And-
and my base rate,
Your base rate.
Right.
Your base rate.
almost $10 an hour.
Right.
So the tips are, right now at Foxwoods, are averaging about $15 an hour.
15 to 16.
Had a good week last
And
week.
what's the health benefit arrangement?
The benefit arrangement?
For
Well,
health- for
right
health-
now,
health insurance.
I'm fighting workers' comp. The 3 surgeries that I had prior to this surgery here, they were all under workers' comp. This one, they denied. Why, I don't know. I think for the simple reason is that they sent me to their doctor up in Hartford, Connecticut. The workers' comp people sent me to Hartford, Connecticut, and the doctor says, well, we think this is a pre-existing condition and not a work-related injury. And when he
What was
said
the-
that,
I'm sorry, I meant what is the health insurance, what is the benefits package relative to health insurance?
the health insurance is great.
They have a package that includes, for full-time workers, they're eligible for a single or family coverage. They pay a portion of that coverage. And of course, I'm sure you're aware with the rising cost of healthcare,
Right.
there's a constant pressure around that.
For
So,
everybody.
For
you know,
everybody, yeah.
Right, for everyone. There is a large part-time workforce also, which is part of the nature of casinos. But in those cases, most of the workers have eligibility for some health care. There's about a quarter of the workforce that doesn't have any health care within the dealer unit.
Oh, within the dealer unit?
Within the dealer unit.
Oh, okay.
So I'm most familiar with that.
Is that because they don't work
They're
enough
called
hours?
casual employees who work, they use them to fill in, but it's a little complicated. They are required, I mean, they depend on the casuals to work to deal with sort of the ups and downs of the weekly schedule for a customer base, so it's.
I'm curious.
That's a challenge to us.
I'm curious, for a full-time person with seniority, when you talk an hour, the multiple breaks that they seem, or the multiple rotations that they seem to take, does that mean somebody can take a break, like sit down for a while, or do they have to come back to another
Well,
table,
normally,
or-
our work hours are, I used to go in at 4 in the morning and work till 12 o'clock noontime. And you're on that table for 1 hour, and you get a break every hour for 20 minutes. Someone, another dealer taps you out, you go take a break, you're there for 20 minutes, you come back up the casino steps, onto the casino floor, and you're dealing another hour.
So there are frequent breaks built into it.
Yep. Actually, you're dealing on the casino floor 6 hours, breaking for 2 in an 8-hour shift.
20-minute.
Yes, 20 minutes, yes, 20-minute breaks.
Interesting. Other questions, thoughts?
Is that unique from your experience, unique to Foxwoods, or is that an industry standard?
Well, it's fairly standard, although there's been pressures around changing those and making the breaks less frequent, which we have resisted, and because I think our feeling is that that's really critical, both, not just for the physical exertion, but also for the mental exertion that it takes for doing the job.
Right.
So it is fairly standard, something, at least that or something similar. It might be a little bit longer in poker. Poker seems to run a little bit longer, like they would have an hour and a half of dealing and then a half-hour breaks, I think it is. So it's not, the total work period is about the same, but
a chunk of time followed by a chunk of break is
and that is fairly standard in the industry.
Thank you. This is all very helpful.
Yeah, very helpful.
Just out of curiosity, will the developers, the casino companies here, how will they figure out which unions they'll work with?
That's a complicated question. I think that in many cases, unions work together and figure out, work in coalition.
Right.
And that's what happened in Michigan when there were a group of unions that formed the casino coalition and worked together to figure out which employee occupations would fit best with their union. And that's how the UAW started working with gaming employees. So we represent, in Michigan, we represent not just dealers and the dual rate dealers, but also the slot techs and the slot attendants and the cage cashiers. And so there's a whole group of titles that we represent in Michigan, and then a range of them in either Atlantic City or in Foxwoods. But what we found is that it works best when a group of unions work together. And there we have Unite Here and the operating engineers and the Teamsters. And so there's I'm leaving some out, so I know this is on the record, but I don't want to offend any unions. But there is a really very healthy coalition, and they work together in bargaining as well. So I think that will be ideal in Massachusetts.
But no task forces working on this topic.
I think the unions are talking to each other.
Yeah.
But, there are, under federal law, it really is the role of unions, not the role of the employer to pick the unions, because there is protection that employees get to choose their own unions.
Yeah, right. Great. Thank you very much.
Very helpful.
Very
Thank you
helpful.
very much.
Yeah, appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having us.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Good luck, Mary.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else follow up to any of these issues? Yeah. Okay. Any other business, new business? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned.